Reorganization and the emergence of possibilities. I've been thinking recently about reorganization and the emergence of possibilities. One observation I keep returning to is that participation often seems easier when there is more than one possibility available. This has led me to wonder how additional possibilities emerge. Looking back over a series of woodworking projects, what interests me is not simply the projects themselves, but the process through which new woodworking projects became available. A woodworking project would emerge, be explored through participation, and over time additional projects would become available that had not previously appeared viable within the available constraints. This has led me to think that reorganization may play an important role in that process. What exactly is reorganization? What does the process of reorganization involve? And how does reorganization relate to the emergence of additional possibilities? A simple example comes from a series of woodworking projects that began with a large hardwood log and a rough idea for a gauntlet. At the time, the gauntlet was not one possibility among a range of clearly visible alternatives. It was simply the project that emerged from the situation as it was understood at the time. The project was attempted, but in the process a number of constraints became apparent. The log was large, the timber was hard, the tools available were limited. The project proved less workable than originally imagined. What interests me is that this was not simply the end of a project. Something about the situation changed. The original project no longer appeared viable in the same way it had before. Rather than continuing to organize around a large hardwood log, attention shifted toward finding a more workable way of developing woodworking skills. Pine dowels became relevant because they were softer, easier to shape, relatively inexpensive, and better suited to experimentation. From that reorientation emerged a pine practice sword. The sword was worked on over the weekend and eventually completed. The project ended, but the process did not. During the following week, the experience of making the sword continued to be reflected upon. The strengths and weaknesses of the project became clearer. The available tools could be reconsidered. The available materials could be reconsidered. The constraints that had become apparent could be reconsidered as well. As this feedback was reflected upon, the orientation evolved through reorientation. Different possibilities began to emerge. One of the ideas that emerged from this process was that a denser timber would likely produce a more durable and refined outcome. Tasmanian oak became increasingly attractive as a material, and from that reorientation, a staff emerged as the next project. That staff was then made over the following weekend. The process continued during the week that followed. The experience of making the staff became part of the feedback that could be reflected upon, and the orientation evolved further. This time, the result was the idea of an improved sword made from Tasmanian oak, supported by the skills, tools, and experience that had been developed through the earlier projects. That sword was then completed over the following weekend. Now the same process appears to be continuing once again. The orientation is beginning to shift toward smaller dowels, harder eucalyptus timbers, and projects that require less material to be removed. From that reorientation, the idea of a wand has begun to emerge. The wand has not yet been made. At this stage, it exists as the most recent possibility emerging from the same ongoing process of feedback, reflection, and reorientation. What strikes me is that reorientation appears to contribute not only to the emergence of additional possibilities, but also to the clarification of what matters. The gauntlet mattered enough to be attempted, yet it was through the process itself that what mattered next became clearer. Through experience, feedback, reflection, and reorientation, the pine sword emerged as the project that now mattered. The same pattern appears throughout the projects that followed. Each project contributed experience, but it also contributed to the ongoing reorientation of what mattered. Through the process of making them, feedback was generated. That feedback could be reflected upon, and through that reflection, the orientation evolved through reorientation. As the orientation evolved, additional possibilities emerged, and with them new ways for things to matter. From this perspective, learning what does not work contributes to reorientation, and through reorientation to the emergence of additional possibilities. Equally, learning what does work can contribute to the same process. Both provide feedback that can be reflected upon, helping to clarify what matters and contributing to the reorientation through which new possibilities emerge. In this sense, learning what does not work can help clarify what does. In this way, the projects appear to participate in an ongoing process of experience, feedback, reflection, and reorientation. Each project emerges from that process while also contributing to the conditions through which additional possibilities emerge, and new ways for things to matter develop through reorientation. This is why I have come to think that reorientation plays a central role in the emergence of additional possibilities. What changed through this process was not simply which project was pursued. What changed was the range of possibilities that appeared available and, alongside them, what mattered within the situation. As the orientation evolved, additional possibilities emerged. What interests me is that these possibilities do more than provide new options. They create new ways for things to matter. A possibility that has not emerged cannot matter in the same way as one that has become available for participation. From this perspective, reorientation appears to occupy a central position within the process. It is through reorientation that experience and feedback become reorganized into new possibilities for participation and new ways for things to matter. What I find most interesting about this idea is that it shifts attention away from the question of which possibility should be chosen and toward the question of how additional possibilities emerge in the first place. The woodworking project suggests that reorientation plays a central role in that process. As the situation reorganizes, additional possibilities become available, and with them, new ways for things to matter. If this is true, then participation may not depend solely on motivation, discipline, or decision-making. It may also depend on the availability of possibilities themselves. From this perspective, reorientation becomes important because it is not merely a change in direction. It is the process through which a situation develops more than one possibility. And perhaps that is why participation often seems easier when there is more than one possibility available.